There's this interesting correlation that I've noticed between painting and spirituality, in that the study of painting sort of leads you to practice mindfulness. When I'm painting a landscape, for example, it's more beneficial to pay attention to the landscape that's being painted without labeling the elements within the landscape. So, for example, a tree within the landscape, if I'm painting what I'm perceiving, it's less beneficial for me to focus on the fact that that's a tree as I'm painting it. As far as I'm concerned, whenever I'm painting a landscape, I'm just painting the very general shapes and values that are being perceived. Because if I pay more attention to the fact that I'm painting a tree with the concept attached to it, then I notice the brain sort of wants to paint what it thinks a tree looks like rather than the experience of that appearance itself, that which we call a tree. And when you're painting what you think a tree looks like, rather than paying full attention to the thing itself, that's very limiting, because we all have a very vague idea of what a tree looks like, and it's a very typical expression usually. But when you actually look at trees in reality, they can grow in so many unusual ways. So to limit yourself by painting what you think a tree looks like is to cut off your relationship to that thing itself, to give more credence to your imagination of that thing. So in a way, this is like mindfulness. You're just experiencing the raw sensory appearance of what is without pulling too much attention into the concepts, the intellectualization of the experience. And in a way, this is a very unifying way of expressing the experience, because it's through conceptualizing it that we draw these boundaries between forms. We create these delineations between this and that. You paint a tree, and that's one thing, and then there's the sky, and that's another thing, and the ground, and that's another thing. But when you turn off those labels, you can see that it's all just one experience appearing as all of these distinctions, these variabilities. And there's a great deal of trust that has to go into it to paint things without being so concerned about the thing that they are, to just paint the general impressions of form, and to trust that the viewer of that painting is going to interpret it in the way that you would want them to interpret it. So I can paint a tree without thinking about it being a tree, but due to the context of all of the other general forms surrounding it, it's going to be read as a tree. And no matter how abstracted it may be, the viewer's eye is going to fill in the gaps. I don't even have to do all of the details that are actually being experienced if I trust that the viewer's mind will fill those gaps in. And it's even how we look at a painting. Like, a painting is one thing in itself, and it goes with the whole experience around it. But if you do just focus on one painting, that painting itself, which could be full of various objects, we still call it one painting, even though we can draw these boundaries within it and act as if there are separate things within the painting. It's still one painting. Everything within that painting shares the same substrate. It's all on the same canvas. And In that same way, everything that we experience shares the same substrate of awareness. All of the experience, not just the visual sensation, but anything about it, any sensate phenomena, it shares the same substrate of the awareness of it. And it's all just arising in these distinct patterns, but it's all awareness appearing as that. And this has a very practical application when carried to other aspects of life. For example, communicating with another person, rather than giving more credence to our projections of that person, our assumptions of what their intentions may be, rather than that, paying more attention to the presence with that person itself, to be fully integrated in that relationship and not so much in your head trying to interpret the situation and maybe believing that your interpretation of them or the context is true, and to lower those judgments, those projections, and saturate your attention on that relationship itself. It's a very intimate thing. And practicing mindfulness in a practical way like this, it's very impactful, much more profound than even just talking about it here. Because all of these are just more concepts, right? So it can seem like it's not really that profound, again, if you're just paying attention to these concepts. But when you're actually in the midst of mindfulness itself, without the concept of mindfulness, it's jaw-droppingly profound to experience anything at all and to fully embrace the raw truth of how it actually is. And so what I'm really trying to get to with this video is just how these ordinary life endeavors, such as painting, they can have very profound insights within them that correlate to the spiritual path. And I'm sure it's not just painting that's like this. There are probably many other things that lead one to be more mindful, to really pay attention to what is without getting so in their head about it. And I would make the suggestion, if you're interested in spiritual seeking or whatnot, if you're not already, find an interest that you like, something creative, some kind of expressive outlet, and try to find the spiritual practices within that, rather than seeing spiritual practices as some other thing, which is separate. Try to integrate it into those passions that you have and just see what that's like.